Going, gone.
Something gets listed and if it's a really good project, it'll be gone the next day.
Frantic home buyers chasing the few properties listed.
Typically the spring market is a busy market, but this feels different.
Renters facing devastating increases.
They're basically almost triple.
A crisis demanding bold new ideas.
Reframing and rethinking how we grow in the future.
To defuse a threat to the region's economy.
It's a real challenge to be able to stay here.
And our cost of living, in particular our housing cost, is a competitive disadvantage right now.
Boston 25 News gets real about the housing crisis. Here now are Boston 25 News anchors Vanessa Welch and Mark Ockerbloom.
The snow is gone, the crocuses are poking through, and for sale signs are starting to dot neighborhood streets. 3 signs it's spring in New England.
Certainly is, and with the pandemic and working from home, we've lived through a couple of crazy years with our real estate market. Bidding wars and waiving contingencies are now the rule, not the exception.
During the next half hour, we're going to get real about housing, such an important issue for the future of our region. Boston 25 morning anchor Heather Hashkes kicks us off tonight, digging into what the busy spring season might bring this year.
Like hunters stalking prey, prospective homebuyers descend on a rare find, a suburban single-family home for sale under $1 million.
It's been kind of challenging, really crazy.
Natalie Rafel is a first-time homebuyer. She's been looking for months.
We've gone to a few open houses with lines out the door, and they run out of booties and sign-in sheets, and yeah, it's definitely a little hard to show up and feel like you're competing with so many other people.
Trey Savage is trying to find a bigger home for his growing family.
Be prepared to stand in line and open up your checkbook.
And that's just what someone did here. This Medfield Colonial, listed at $950,000, sold after just one open house on a Friday afternoon.
The inventory situation in Boston is particularly dire. There are 40% fewer homes for sale than there were this time last year. There are 18% fewer homes coming onto the market as new listings.
Daryl Fairweather is the chief economist at Redfin.com. She says one reason so few properties are for sale is many current homeowners are scared to jump into this market.
It's also very expensive to move up into a larger home because everybody wants a larger home these days. So there just isn't really a huge incentive for people to move, especially if they've already locked in a low mortgage rate last year.
It is a basic lesson in economics when demand exceeds supply.
A pretty frenetic marketplace for the houses that do go on the market. They typically go under agreement in 3 days max.
I've been going with buyers multiple weekends in a row. One place we put an offer in on got 24 offers, I believe, the very first weekend.
Steve Fassell of Rise Realty in Brookline says buyers are forced to adjust their expectations.
And gone are the days of, I want, this, and this, and I'm going to go find it this weekend, and we're good.
He's hopeful more supply will come on the market later this spring, and we'll be watching how high interest rates go.
I think with interest rates starting to rise a little bit, you're going to see a little bit more price stabilization, I would expect, over the coming years. That is not to say that prices won't continue to grow, but they might just grow at a slower rate.
A 30-year fixed mortgage is now around 4%. Fairweather, an MIT-trained economist, sees them drifting higher. She says other factors like the invasion of Ukraine could also play a role in how the market behaves.
The increase in gas prices could make Americans just feel poorer and have less disposable income, and they may be less willing to spend money on things like housing. So there are effects going in multiple directions, and it's just a really uncertain time.
Especially when someone's considering what is likely the largest purchase they'll ever make. Heather Hashkes, Boston 25 News.
And consider this. According to the Greater Boston Real Estate Board, the median price for a single-family home was $755,000 in February. That's a jump of more than 16% since 2021. So how is a buyer supposed to navigate a market like this? Boston 25 morning news anchor Gene Lavanchy got some expert advice from a local realtor.
For the buyer these days, it's like you have to act fast. You have to put an offer in, oftentimes over the asking price. What's your advice to people who are looking to buy?
Get a pre-approval, have that ready to go. You don't want to be calling a mortgage broker on a Sunday for your pre-approval to put in an offer when there's a deadline on Sunday evening or Monday afternoon. Be working with a realtor, do your research, make sure you're working with a realtor that's local to the area, who has a lot of expertise and can guide you through the very competitive process.
And cash offers have been, pretty prominent out there. Is that still happening, and can you buy without cash?
Well, you can certainly buy without cash, but it's the total offer package.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, buyers are having to waive contingencies, waive mortgages,
inspections.
Waive without question, and go in significantly over asking price. The price is extremely important, but the seller and the seller's agent want to know that the deal is going to get to the finish line, that it's going to close.
Of course, if you are selling, you're in the driver's seat. Gene Hashkes recommends sellers declutter and stage their home before putting it on the market. He generally tells his clients not to invest in major renovations. That is better to just list as part of the property and make it sooner. He says quick fixes like painting and replacing carpeting are worth considering.
Times are tough right now for renters, too. Boston is now considered the third most expensive city if you're looking for an apartment. Mayor Michelle Wu is taking action on a campaign promise, looking for a way to bring some relief to renters through rent stabilization. Her goal is to set limits on annual rent increases for existing tenants and give added protections against displacement. A new committee will look at current housing conditions here and how other cities are tackling this issue.
This is the #1 concern on residents' minds all across our city. How we will afford to stay, how we can make ends meet when housing prices continue to go up and the needs are so great coming out of this pandemic.
2/3 of the city's residents currently rent.
So why are prices so high? Well, a lot of it has to do with the supply of new housing.
The number of units being built is a trickle of what's needed to keep prices down. As Boston 25's Catherine Parada explains, a new state law will change zoning regulations to require more multifamily housing.
The Baker administration wants to see more of this. Multifamily housing that's just a short distance from public transportation.
It's smart housing policy, it's smart transit policy, it's smart climate policy, and it's smart local economic development policy.
Michael Keneally is the state secretary of Housing and Economic Development. He says today's housing crisis was years in the making.
From 1960 to 1990, we permitted 900,000 new housing units. From 1990 till today, it's 470,000.
Permitting construction, particularly multifamily buildings, is next to impossible in many suburban communities.
You can get a lot more density, a lot more units produced when you create these multifamily complexes near downtowns and near public transit.
Now a new law is mandating a change in zoning. The so-called 175 MBTA communities will each have to develop a multifamily zone. It will need to be at least 50 acres and allow for 15 units per acre. And a public transit facility will need to be within a half a mile. Some communities like Salem already have a lot of apartments near their train station, but Mayor Kim Driscoll says they still might have to zone for up to 900 more units.
As a local official, you like having local autonomy over what's happening in your community. But if we look at this problem around housing, we're not going to solve it one city and town at a time. I mean, there's a big mismatch between the amount of housing we have and the amount of housing we need. That is causing prices to go up.
Driscoll admits this might be a harder pill to swallow for some suburbs, some of which have minimum plot sizes for single-family homes. The Massachusetts Municipal Association wrote this letter asking the governor to veto the bill before he signed it, saying instead of a partnership with municipalities, Section 18 would create a statewide mandate imposing a one-size-fits-all zoning scheme on 175 communities, overriding local decision-making.
We need 200,000 homes by the year 2030.
Housing advocates like Rachel Heller applaud the new regulations.
We can't grow if people can't live near their jobs, near their networks, near their families, near their doctors, near their schools.
Communities are finalizing their plans right now and must submit them to state officials for approval this spring. Cities and towns that don't comply will face penalties like the loss of state grants. Catherine Parada, Boston 25 News.
These new state regulations don't require any of the new units to be designated as affordable. That decision will be left with each community.
We have much more ahead for you on this Boston 25 Gets Real about housing special.
An old city getting a new look a younger generation can accept.
I think Worcester is a great place to start out. It's something I can afford.
New England's second largest city is one of the country's hottest real estate markets. Why so many young people are moving there.
There is no shortage of vacant strip malls in the area. Coming up, a new plan envisions redeveloping many of them to help put a dent in the housing crisis.
Assembling instead of building a house. Going modular is getting more and more popular and has the potential to save consumers thousands of dollars. We're back right after this.
Welcome back to our spring housing special. Throughout the pandemic, real estate in Boston suburbs and Cape Cod, it has been red hot.
It sure has. As Boston25 News anchor Gene Lavanchy tells us, now you can add Worcester to that list.
Seeing an opportunity in a sea of triple deckers.
Right now, I'm looking for a multifamily property, something I could kind of own or occupy in one unit and also, rent out the other.
Abdul Javad thinks Worcester is the right place to buy his first piece of property.
It's something that's significantly less than, a bigger market like Boston in terms of price, but it's still booming.
That's because a lot of young high-tech workers like Javad are interested in moving here. Realtor.com named Worcester one of the country's top 10 hottest markets for 2022.
Our top housing markets list is based on projected home sales growth and home price growth in the year ahead.
They estimate sales will be up 8.4% and prices will climb another 8.2% this year. Danielle Hill is their chief economist.
What do you see about Worcester that makes it so attractive to home buyers right now?
So in Worcester, you've got much more affordability than you do in the Boston market. And cities like Worcester that are not too far away, that have their own budding economies in their own right, are really attracting outsiders.
Polar Park, good colleges, a growing scientific community, a diverse population, and cultural institutions are all magnets for young people.
I've just seen a lot of bidding wars. A property could start at $350 and end up selling for $425.
Jay Coe is a realtor with the Legacy Group. He says although Worcester is known for its triple deckers, the city of Seven Hills has all kinds of housing, including starter homes and stately colonials. Getting more space for your money is more appealing than ever.
A lot of workers aren't going to Boston and those major metropolitan cities. They're staying home because you can work remotely.
We've added 25,000 residents in the city alone, since 2010, and you want to be a city that's growing. But it also presents challenges.
Tim Murray is the president and CEO of the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce.
So how do you make sure that the city continue to be affordable? How do you make sure that people who lived here and grew up here can continue to stay here?
The Chamber is encouraging the city to work with developers to increase the supply of housing, including units that are affordable.
It's always a good opportunity to have a challenge of managing growth rather than decline.
Growth that's soaring because of the dreams of people like Abdul Javad.
I think Worcester is a great place to start out. It's something I can afford. It's something I feel like I could excel in the Worcester community.
Realtor.com also cited Worcester's easy access to Boston via the Mass Pike and commuter rail as additional reasons for the top 10 designation. Gene Lavanchy, Boston25 News.
One of the biggest challenges, as you've been hearing, is creating enough new housing to keep up with all the demand. As Boston25 News anchor Chris Flanagan explains, modular homes could be a key building block to finding a solution.
But if you kind of pan around, you can see lights are installed, everything's painted, windows and doors are trimmed, gas fireplace that's fully installed. Including the mantle was done at the factory.
The finishing touches on a new colonial in Westwood.
Another key important thing with modular home building is we do all the plans for you. So we're building it modular, so we can take care of all the architecturals.
Joe Enright is with Westchester Modular Homes. They build sections of a house in a factory, transport them to a site, and just like giant Legos, assemble them into a real house. A market research firm expects this approach to grow, up more than 90% by 2028 in the United States.
We're booked out further than we have been in 15, 20 years.
Just seemed to make a lot of sense because of the quality, the control inside, and the cost.
David Staff ordered this home for his multi-generational family. He felt his old ranch was beyond updating. He couldn't believe how quickly the old house came down, or how fast the new one went up.
It only took one portion of one day. All of a sudden, boom, there's a house.
This report by Boston-based McKinsey & Company estimates a project's timeline can be reduced by 50%, while bringing down costs 20% compared to building on site.
Everything is custom on modular homes today. There is no such thing as a standard home.
Doug George of Dedham has been building modular homes for 20 years, including this one in a historic district of Newton. He says costs are less because customers pick everything up front, and that protects them from potential increases in the costs of materials.
With prices going crazy, once you come up with a package and a price from the factory, those prices are stable. You can get almost any style of home that you can conceive of.
Modular homes used to face a bad rap for poor quality. Enright says the homes today are actually sturdier than traditional construction because they have to travel.
We use about 20% more lumber, but not only that, the glues and the screws, and everywhere we're looking to put strength in.
That sounds and looks good to David Staff. He hopes this modular home will house his family for generations to come.
Well, that was the dream. That was the dream for sure, and it's there it is.
Doug George tells us a homeowner usually has keys to their new house within 4 months after the pieces are placed on the foundation. I'm Chris Flanagan, Boston 25 News.
Very interesting. Well, a chronic shortage of new housing is driving prices up.
140,000 units we need over the next decade. The best way to do this is on sites that have already been developed.
Here's one idea: convert vacant strip malls into housing. We'll explain how that could work.
Saying enough is enough with the high cost of housing, why more people are leaving the area, and what it means for our economy when this Boston 25 Gets Real About Housing special returns. One thing's clear about the housing crisis: business as usual isn't going to fix it.
As Boston 25 News reporter Jason Law found out, one new idea that's gaining traction is to convert some of the region's vacant retail space into housing.
John Casey has been running Locks and Keys since 1977 at the Woburn Mall, which is now being redeveloped as Woburn Village.
Our smaller malls were outdated, and it was just a time to make the change.
What's changed is the addition of 350 housing units, a quarter of them with below market rent.
A lot of the places have the live, work, and play in the same area. It cuts down driving time, and it's very convenient for the locals.
In a region starved for new housing, repurposing underutilized strip malls is an idea Chris Kuschel of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council likes.
I think it has the potential to be transformative.
One of the biggest hurdles for creating new housing is a chronic shortage of land in eastern Massachusetts.
140,000 units we need over the next decade. The best way to do this is on sites that have already been developed. That saves trees, reduces traffic impacts.
Kuschel co-authored this report. He says they identified more than 3,000 sites in Greater Boston that could be candidates for redevelopment. 118 in Boston, 105 in Quincy, 68 in Marlborough, and 66 in Peabody. Kuschel says that if just the top 10% of those sites were made over, the impact would be huge.
And what I mean by that is things like where is it located? Is it near transit? Does it have a high walk score? Things of that nature. Can you get to a lot of jobs easily? We found that we could build approximately 125,000 units. That would go a substantial way to meeting our housing needs.
In Woburn, John Casey already likes what he sees.
I like it. I think it's going to be more community oriented, and you're going to have a lot of people knowing your neighbors and probably the same steady customers.
It's important to note that this research project was done before the pandemic hit, but the authors say the impact on retail over the last 2 years, coupled with the large number of vacancies, could help move this concept along. In Boston, Jason Law, Boston 25 News.
One hurdle for this concept is zoning. Many communities will require commercial areas to be rezoned for residential use, and that can create a bureaucratic nightmare.
Crying uncle over the high cost of housing.
It's a real challenge to be able to stay here.
Great migration out of Massachusetts. What this could mean for the local economy when our housing special returns. We are dedicating so much time and effort to the topic of housing because it affects just about every aspect of life here in Massachusetts.
There is concern about how it will impact our future as more people say enough with these high prices and move someplace cheaper. The history, the culture, the people, There's a lot to love about Boston.
It's so marvelous to be able to go to the Boston Red Sox. You've got gorgeous museums. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you would stay, but any person that leaves is leaving because they can't afford it.
And people are leaving. United Van Line's annual migration study found Massachusetts was ranked 7th last year when it comes to residents moving out of their state.
I thought about it. Florida's a good candidate. Yes.
Our cost of living, in particular our housing cost, is a competitive disadvantage right now.
Michael Keneally is the state's Secretary of Housing and Economic Development.
There's a lot of places to make a life in this country and a lot of places that are cheaper than us. And in a world, especially now, post-pandemic, where talent is more mobile.
Mayor Kim Driscoll of Salem is seeing the effect of this exodus firsthand.
I'm the mother of a 24-year-old who is living in Atlanta right now, where the housing is cheaper, the climate is better, and her job is in Massachusetts. She can work from home and work anywhere.
Historically, Massachusetts could rely on college students to stay after they graduated. That's also changing.
The cost of living is so high, and definitely after school, it is a factor.
High housing costs are nothing new around here, but housing advocates say they're feeling a new urgency to address a problem that threatens the region's future.
This is really important if we want to preserve the place that we all love.
Boston 25 News will continue to follow the ups and downs of the market for you this spring. You can find continuing coverage on our website. Just click on the Gets Real tab. And thanks for joining us for this Boston 25 Gets Real About Housing special. I'm Mark Ockerblom.
And I'm Vanessa Welch. From all of us here at Boston 25 News, be well.